Are we living in a uniquely unhappy time, or are we just more aware of it?
No, this is unfortunate. I would like to say that there's nothing new under the sun, and unhappiness is as old as forever, simply because the human brain, once again, is evolved for unhappiness more than it's evolved for happiness. But right now, we're passing through a period, at least since we've been able to keep data on happiness and unhappiness, that shows that we've had an unhappiness epidemic, what we call a psychogenic epidemic. It's like COVID, but without biological origin, which is why I do my work. I want to get to the bottom of it. It's like this forensic social science to, figure out how technology and culture and all of this is working together to give us these pretty uniquely unhappy times, especially for people under 35.
And what do you think the culprits are? Do you think it's something like the hormones in the meat, or the cell service, cell phones, or social media time, or whatever? I mean, there's so many things that could possibly be chemical, but yeah. Or is it just?
I think it largely has to do with the fact that people can't find the meaning of their lives because their brains are broken. And the reason their brains are broken is because the highly engineered culture, the tip of the spear of which is the way that we misuse and overuse technology, has made us not use the right hemispheres of our brain. I mean, it's funny because we're so good at solving problems. And I'll give you an example of a problem that we solved leading to a happiness catastrophe. That's all part of this. We hate being bored. People hate being bored because it's boring. It's just not that fun. But for the longest time, suck it up, buttercup. You're going to be bored, right? It's not like, my great-grandfather, Leroy Brooks in Olathe, Kansas. His life was so interesting behind the mule. But I'll tell you one thing that he never said to his wife, my great-grandmother, Mary Ellen Brooks. He never came home and said, honey, I had a panic attack behind the mule today because his brain was working right. The problem is that we solved boredom. My colleague, Dan Gilbert at Harvard, does these boredom experiments where he brings people into the lab and they'll sit in a room with nothing to do. For 15 minutes, nothing to do. And for 15 minutes, the only choice that they have is sit there or touch a button on a little key fob, and that will self-administer a painful electric shock. And he wants to know, pain or boredom, you choose. A quarter of the women shock themselves. 2/3 of the dudes shock themselves. All you need to know about men, right? One guy shocks himself 190 times in 15 minutes, and he got thrown out of the experiment for being, for liking it, effectively. He was like a twisted freak. But the whole point is that we don't like boredom. And so we figured out a way to solve boredom, which is the computer in our pockets. And what that does is it keeps us in the wrong part of our brain, chronically in the wrong part of our brain. And little by little by little, we vacate the sense of the mystery and meaning of our lives. And that's the problem. Because we're just bad at using our brains correctly. Because we don't want to be bored for 1 second behind the traffic light or in the supermarket line. The average American checks her or his phone 205 times a day. And that keeps our brain working wrong, is what it comes down to. And that's just one example of that. The hustle and grind of an engineered culture does this in every single way. This is not the fault of the algorithm builders in Silicon Valley. On the contrary, they're just responding to the culture.
Every wonderful advancement or every good thing that happens in our lives, I believe there's also a flip side of it that is negative.
Of course.
If you win the lottery, that seems great. Mm-mm. But you're going to lose you're not going to know who's your real friend. Your whole life will,
It'll change because you didn't earn your success. Or classically, if I want to wipe out this back pain, I can take an analgesic. Yeah. That's a great.
There's so many examples.
That's how every bad story starts.
So many examples of this. And it's like, I rarely hear people talk about the negatives with all this wonderful advancement that's happened in our lives with technology and cell phones and,
right.
Chat, GPT, all these great things that have happened. There are equal negatives with all of them, but we never really talk about them.
Yeah. I think that in many cases there's kind of a J curve where you invent something and then the net well-being goes down before it comes up. And we're in the bottom of that J when it comes to technology, or when it comes to screens and personal technology right now. And I think that's what actually explains the happiness depression.
What belief about happiness did you personally have to unlearn?
I personally had to unlearn the idea, it's sort of based on what we talked about a little bit earlier, that I could actually solve the problem and be happy. That was a big mistake that I made. I actually thought that if I cracked the code and lived in a particular way, I could be happy. Most young people think that, by the way. I mean, most young people think when I get older, I'm going to have it figured out, and then I'm going to be happy, like really happy, right? And that's wrong. The whole point of getting older is recognizing that you want a full life. You want to be fully alive with all of the experiences. And so what we have to recognize, and the way to live right beyond that mistake, is to be able to say in the morning, not just, remember Norman Vincent Peale, The Power of Positive Thinking? And he'd say, first thing in the morning, you should say this psalm: "This is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it." And be just like, it's going to be great. That's fine. But add one more thing, and I'm truly grateful for the problems I'm going to face this day, because those are the sources of my learning and growth. And that's the Zen master. And that's what I've learned. And that's the mistake that I've traditionally made and had to get beyond. And when I'm weak, I still fall prey to it.
Are you familiar with the personality, I don't know what to call it. Are you familiar with the Enneagram?
Yeah.
You are?
Yeah, little. I mean, that's not something I use in my own work.
Yeah,
but there's so many things that are like that. Yeah.
It's fascinating. And I've seen people like Enneagram 7s who think that just traveling and having fun and partying all the time is going to make them happy.
Yeah.
And then there are people like Enneagram 4s who do the exact opposite. They kind of enjoy being sad.
Right. Yeah. So these are people who are differently weighted with respect to these three macronutrients: enjoyment, satisfaction, and meaning. And there's some people who are highly, highly, highly weighted toward enjoyment. There's some people who are highly weighted toward meaning. So poets are highly oriented toward meaning.
Fourth.
And they have a lot of negative affect for sure, but they want deep feelings. They want the deep feelings because they're just like, they want to go, but they want more mystery. They want more meaning in their lives, the way that works out. People who are deeply addicted to success, they're satisfaction. It's all about the satisfaction or the joy of an accomplishment after struggle. And what I have to help people do is understand that they're super good at one macronutrient, but that does not make a complete meal.
No.
And they can be happier by focusing on the ones that they're not as attuned to.